Today I have a message to you, and I believe it's from God. It better be from God, right? It's about prayer. So the title of the message is A Powerful Weapon. And it's in Acts chapter 12. We've been working our way through Acts, as you know, and sometimes we think that when we're choosing a topic, we chose to go into Acts, but it's never a coincidence where God is leading us. So it seems like for every week that's going, it's tying into other things that are going on in the community. And now we want to focus on prayer, and today's message is, what do you know? It's about prayer. And to have something to relate to, I think everyone can relate to, that you've been in very difficult circumstances, where you just feel completely powerless, and you're even thinking, you don't even know if you can pray about it, because it seems so hard and difficult. Maybe you've lost someone in your family, maybe a son or a daughter has run away from home, maybe a family member has rejected you, or maybe you're persecuted by authorities, or it can be any number of things. And faced with that, you feel completely powerless. And today's message is an encouraging message from Luke in Acts, and he's telling this testimony of how prayer of the disciples praying, followers of Jesus praying, not only is it powerful, but it can completely change the plans of the evil one. So we will see how that plays out. So let's read together. It's Acts chapter 12. We have it here on the screen. I should have sent it to Barbara as well. I suddenly realized, but okay. Now, about that time, Herod the king laid hands on some who belonged to the church in order to mistreat them. And he had James, the brother of John, put to death with a sword. When he saw that it pleased the Jews, he proceeded to arrest Peter also. Now it was during the days of unleavened bread. When he had seized him, he put him in prison. And delivering him to 4 squads of soldiers to guard him, intending after the Passover to bring him out before the people. So Peter was kept in the prison, but prayer for him was being made fervently by the church to God. So the history, it's like history background here. Now from the day of Pentecost, where Acts started, and until this point, it's been around 10 years. So around 10 years since the first persecution of the church broke out after the day of Pentecost. And now we see a new persecution. But this time, it's not done by the religious leaders. This time it's done by the political leadership. So Herod the king, he was a Jew, but he was a political leader, because his authority was from the Romans and not from the religious authorities. And the Herod dynasty, it was actually a succession of 3 kings: grandfather, father, and son. And we know this name quite well because it's mentioned several times, because they were very involved in the Bible around the time of Jesus, with Herod the Great, who was the grandfather. And they all had innocent blood on their hands. So Herod the Great, he was responsible for this terrible slaughter of all the baby boys in Bethlehem who were 2 years and younger. He tried to get rid of baby Jesus, and he slaughtered all the baby boys in that village. And then we have his son, and he had John the Baptist killed. He was king during the time of this area, during the time that Jesus ministered. And then now it's his grandson, Herod Agrippa, and he's going after the apostles. And he was to be actually the last king of Judea forever, or since that time. So he became the last king, and we shall see how that played out. It didn't end very well for him. And he has now arrested James, the brother of John. He was one of the 3 apostles who were closest to Jesus. We had Peter, and we had John, and we had James. And death by sword, he was put to death by sword. It actually means that he was decapitated. They cut his head off. And this punishment was only for murderers and for apostates, people who left the Jewish faith. And it seems that it happened so fast that the disciples or the followers of Jesus, they didn't even have time to get together and pray for him. And now they are praying fervently for their brother Peter. And this word, I had to look that up because that, since English is my second language, this word fervent is not that common, I think. So it was defined as exhibiting, almost need to be defined in itself, to show or to be marked by a great intensity of feeling. Or another word would be zealous. We remember the Apostle Paul, he was zealous in his persecution of the Christians before he himself became a believer. And so now they are faced with this grave situation where one of their main leaders has just been decapitated, and now Peter is in prison, and he's gonna suffer the same fate. So they, faced with this gravity, they are now gathered together and they are praying fervently. And it's clear that this King Herod, he was an opportunist. He saw that this thing that he did was very well received by the religious leadership among the Jews, and so now he wants to go even further, and now he wants to. I guess he's even been bragging about this. How he's been captured, the main guy, and now he's gonna take him out after Easter. He was a people pleaser, we can say. He was trying to please people, and if that is our motive, to please people, then we become an easy prey for Satan. That's a sure way to be easy prey for Satan. I'm going to compare now, because there is a real comparison of Peter to Jesus. We remember when Paul was sharing about Stephen, how his life was so similar to Jesus' life, how Luke describes him as this man who is so alike Jesus. And the way he dies and everything is just so like Jesus. And now we also see a striking resemblance of how Peter is walking the way that Jesus did. And the first thing we see here is that Peter is arrested right before Easter, and he's waiting to be executed. So let's continue the story in verse 6. On the very night when Herod was about to bring him forward. Peter was sleeping between two soldiers, bound with two chains, and guards in front of the door were watching over the prison. And behold, an angel of the Lord suddenly appeared, and a light shone in the cell. And he struck Peter's side and woke him up, saying, "Get up quickly." And his chains fell off his hands. And the angel said to him, "Gird yourself and put on your sandals." And he did so. And he said to him, "Wrap your cloak around you and follow me." And he went out and continued to follow. And he did not know that what was being done by the angel was real, but thought he was seeing a vision. When they had passed the first and second guard, they came to the iron gate that leads into the city, which opened for them by itself. And they went out and went along one street, and immediately the angel departed from him. When Peter came to himself, he said, "Now I know for sure that the Lord has sent forth his angel and rescued me from the hand of Herod and from all that the Jewish people were expecting." And something that I noticed here when I was reading this is that Peter is about to be executed, right? It's the night before his execution schedule. And he's sleeping. And he's sleeping actually very hard. So hard, in fact, that he's not awakened by an angel coming into his cell, or even the light that is shining. You would think that before your execution you might be a little light on your sleep. Not so with Peter. So the angel actually has to strike him to wake him. So it seems that he has come to terms with what is going to happen. Now he's ready. He's ready to go. He's ready to meet his Maker. Maybe he didn't expect it at this point, because he was. I think even Jesus told him that he would be old before he would die. But here we have the same. Let's compare with Jesus again. We have the chains of death could not hold Jesus. And the stone covering his grave was rolled away, and we have the chains holding Peter, could not hold him. The prison gate was opened. So Jesus was resurrected, and for Peter must have also been a feeling of resurrection. And suddenly he's just a part of the most spectacular prison escape in history. And then the angel leaves. And suddenly he's back to reality, and no more miracles to be expected. From here on, you can do it yourself. And we can say, or we can see that it's, to some extent, it's also the story of all of us. We were once imprisoned, in the chains of sin, in darkness. And then we were awakened from that. The door was opened, and we can enter the New Jerusalem. So it's a very symbolic picture that he's also living through here. Let's continue the story from verse 12. And when he realized this, he went to the house of Mary, the mother of John, who was also called Mark, where many were gathered together and were praying. When he knocked at the door of the gate, a servant girl named Rhoda came to answer. When she recognized Peter's voice, because of her joy, she did not open the gate, but ran in and announced that Peter was standing in front of the gate. They said to her, "You are out of your mind." But she kept insisting that it was so. They kept saying, "It is his angel." But Peter continued knocking, and when they had opened the door, they saw him and were amazed. But motioning to them with his hand to be silent, he described to them how the Lord had led him out of the prison. And he said, "Report these things to James and the brethren." Then he left and went to another place. This is also familiar to us how the disciples did not believe the news about Jesus' resurrection. When the women came running from the grave, "He's alive, we've seen him." And here again, they don't believe this woman who's coming with this news. It's so improbable to them that the natural mind cannot grasp the supernatural, right? So you can't explain what happened. That's why it's called supernatural. It's not natural. And so, but in some ways, it's kind of comical because it's he's knocking on the door as they are praying. They have not even finished praying, and he's knocking on the door. And so the response is, "Now, go away. We are trying to pray here," right? And it's so improbable to them that they don't see that the prayer has been answered before they've finished praying. The authorities have used violence, and what is the response of the church? Well, there's no demonstrations. Nobody's going to the palace of Herod. Nobody is screaming at soldiers or at the authorities. Nobody's throwing stones or Molotov cocktails. And nobody's trying any daring attempts to rescue this lone prisoner. Well, that would have been a movie immediately. But they are employing a weapon, a very powerful weapon, actually the latest and greatest in spiritual warfare weapon systems. And it's prayer in the name of Jesus. And the interesting thing about this weapon is that they're not employing it against their enemies. They're employing it for their friend. And then there are angels, God's agents, and they are sent to deal with the evil one's plans. I was reminded of a friend, a good friend, who he's been to Moldova several times, and he once mentioned this, or he told this testimony of a time he was in great distress because he had decided to go in a direction in which he thought God was leading him, and it was actually to be part of a prayer ministry. And God had specifically asked him to do this prayer ministry for 30 years. He asked him to dedicate 30 years of his life for this. It was so concrete. And he said yes to this. And I guess it's around 15 years in or something like that. And he's still going in this. But there was a time after he decided to go in this direction that everything just seemed to fall apart. And nothing was moving in the direction he was expecting. All the doors were closing. People were rejecting him in his face, and he built up this anxiety and stress, and over several months, and he didn't understand why would God call him down this road if nothing is working. And so he had been building on this for a long time, and finally he came one evening to the prayer room, and he was really worked up, and he was just ready to scream at God and just put him in his place. And he falls to his knees, and then he just goes, because this was a prayer meeting with a number of people they were praying about something else altogether, and he just all he manages to say is God, and then somebody taps him on the shoulder and says, I'm sorry to disturb you, but I think God is telling you that you're doing the right thing and you just need to continue. So all this thing that he had been carrying for this time was just immediately just fell away, and he understood how God, knew where he was going. God knew what he needed. God knew him so well that he had prepared this person to reach out to him in this very instance. So this is, sometimes we can pray for years and we don't see the results, and sometimes we get the answer even before we can start praying, which he did in this case. And so, fabulous testimony, and very encouraging. And we know that Jesus withdrew to the Garden of Gethsemane when the threat to his life was at the greatest. And he taught the disciples how to pray. And his command was, keep watch and pray. Keep watch and pray. So it means, to keep watch is to, in the spiritual sense, is to keep a heart awake. Be attentive in your spirit. And live in an inner preparedness. Prepared for what may come. 1 Peter 5, verse 8 says, be of sober spirit, be on the alert. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour. It's pretty serious. And also, Luke 11 says, if a son asks for bread from any father among you, will he give him a stone? Or if he asks for a fish, will he give him a serpent instead of a fish? God wants to answer our prayers. And continuing our story, Peter wants to send a report to James and the brothers. And this James is the brother of Jesus. And this James, he was not a believer when Jesus was alive, or during his first ministry, but only after his resurrection. And he became one of the big leaders in the church of Jerusalem after Jesus' resurrection. So he wants to encourage them with this message and let them know about this testimony. See, because it's good to share these testimonies. It builds our faith. Peter was released from prison in a daring way, and God opened the way literally for him. So you want to share that. It's good news. And let's see how this good news play out for the other side of the equation from verse 18. Now, when day came, there was no small disturbance among the soldiers as to what could have become of Peter. When Herod had searched for him and had not found him, he examined the guards and ordered that they be led away to execution. Then he went down from Judea to Caesarea and was spending time there. So it seems that this was a pretty heavy blow to Herod's self-esteem. He was counting on this impressive public display, and he was going to show the Jewish religious leaders how he was a man of power, and now he's going to get rid of this Christian sect forever. He's now gotten hold of the main leader, and he wants to make his execution public. And instead he has this huge disappointment, and so much so actually that he moves away from Jerusalem and goes to live in Caesarea, and he lives there until this happens, which is from verse 20. Now he was very angry with the people, this is about Herod, he was very angry with the people of Tyre and Sidon. And with one accord they came to him, and having won over Blastus, the king's chamberlain, they were asking for peace, because their country was fed by the king's country. On an appointed day, Herod, having put on his royal apparel, took his seat on the rostrum, and began delivering an address to them. The people kept crying out, "The voice of a God and not of a man." And immediately an angel of the Lord struck him, because he did not give God the glory. And he was eaten by worms and died. Wow. These two cities, you may have heard about them. They were like city-states, Tyre and Sidon. And they were in a region that was assigned to the tribe of Asher. And when the Jews settled the land, the promised land. However, the tribe of Asher, when they came and saw these cities, they saw that they were so fortified that they decided, no, let's not invade those cities. So they just left them. So they were in this territory that belongs to the Asher tribe. And nowadays it's in Lebanon, I believe. But because they just let them be surrounded, basically, in the land, they were like city-states, and they were dependent on the Judea for food. They traded, I guess, and because the tribe of Asher decided not to invade, these two cities were a constant thorn in the side of Israel, and it led them into idolatry several times. Maybe you've heard the name of Jezebel. She was part of the city of Sidon. Now this passage, looks very. I mean, it's written very in graphic detail about how he died, and it can seem like, wow, really? He was eaten by worms? And so, but there is actually another telling of this story, not by Luke, but by Josephus, the Jewish historian, and I went and read it, and it's strikingly similar. And Josephus actually adds some more detail to it. He writes that as he was a contemporary of Herod, so he may well have witnessed this event himself. And he writes that Herod was wearing a beautiful robe woven of silver, with silver threads. And so as he was moving in the sun, there was this brilliant reflection on his robe, so it must have been an extravagant sight, and people were blended by this. And also people were there to flatter him. These people of Tyre and Sidon, they depended on him, so they wanted to at least be on his side, and they were using flatter, to flattering him, and knowing that he was a man who liked to please men. He probably also liked to receive praise. And so he accepted their adulation as a god. And then he was immediately struck by an angel. And now Luke is using the same word as he used when Peter was struck by the angel in the prison to wake him. Maybe it was the same angel, but the outcome was certainly different. So Josephus also writes that Herod immediately had severe stomach pains, and he dies a terrible death, you could say. A few days later, he died, and our scripture, the Bible version we're using here, the NASB, says, "eaten by worms." And this is a terrible internal illness, apparently, and we know what this illness is. It's very common, and we have a word for it. It's called pride. And selfish ambition. So he was literally eaten up from within by this disease, by his pride. And then there is the story ends with this short but really fabulous verse 24. But the word of the Lord continued to grow and to be multiplied. But the word of the Lord continued to grow and to be multiplied. And whenever this word is used, multiplying, when this is used about the early church, it means a 30-fold or a 60-fold or a 100-fold increase. So it's big, all in this small sentence. And so it's a very encouraging way to end the chapter. And there was a very nice quote here by John Stott, famous theologian, and he summarized it in this way. The chapter opens with James dead, Peter in prison, and Herod triumphing. It closes with Herod dead, Peter free, and the word of God triumphing. Such is the power of God to overthrow hostile human plans and to establish his own in their place. So for me, this is a very encouraging chapter. You can read it and be encouraged by the power of prayer. And I would like us to pray now together. I know that there are many who are having, in our ICF family who are going through hardships right now. And so I would like us to pray together.